Hello and welcome to Release Day, the podcast series that dives into the stories and strategies of how Canada's music community are releasing their art to the world. I'm your host, Alex Heward. On this week's podcast, I speak with Stephen Stanley of the Stephen Stanley Band about how the COVID-19 pandemic afforded him the time to complete and release his album, Live Static Roots, an album recorded live at the 2018 Static Roots Festival in Oberhausen, Germany. But before we get into the episode, we acknowledge the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. Land acknowledgements mark a small and important step in the process of reconciliation and building a positive relationship with our country's Indigenous peoples. Now be sure to stick around after the interview, as Graham and I will expand on moments that stood out to us from the interview, and we're also going to share some of the artists we've had in rotation for the past week. Now you might recognize the name Stephen Stanley, and you would be correct in assuming him to be one of the founding members of Canadian alt-rock band The Lowest of the Low. Our conversation begins on the topic of Canadian folk legend Gordon Lightfoot and Stephen's experience working within the hallowed walls of an iconic Toronto venue.
I was really lucky because I had a job at Massey Hall for, must have been from 1982 to 86 or 87. And that was kind of his heyday playing there. So I got to see him about 11 times a year, and I talked to him once in a while. He was a super nice. I didn't know him, but he was very. Whenever you'd see him, he was always very friendly. But boy, what a consummate performer! And like you said, his catalog of music is. I haven't seen the documentary yet, which I've been meaning to do. So I'm glad you reminded me, because because it's streaming on CBC. I never think to sort of go to that as a.
I know, me neither.
So inconvenient.
I know, right? No, I'm with you. I've been watching actually a lot of Indigenous documentaries, trying to get educated on that side of our culture as well. But yeah, man, that's fantastic. I heard that you mentioned that as on Brent's No Sleep Till Sudbury podcast, that you got to work at Massey Hall, and man, that just must have been just so fantastic to just be part of everything there.
It's totally true. And I think I said something on Brent's podcast that really, I thought about it afterwards, and I was like, holy cow, I didn't even think about that at the time. In that there's no chance I would have seen an eighth of those shows if I was paying for them all, just because, kid with a part-time job going to school, there's no chance I could have afforded all that. I got to see so much. And in those days, Massey Hall was kind of the go-to place to play. Like there was, clubs the size of the Elmo were around, but there wasn't like the Phoenixes and the Leafs Palaces weren't around yet in those. So it was quite anybody that was touring on an international level was probably there, or the Gardens. So consequently, I got to see everybody. I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and he was reminiscing about seeing U2 there twice. And I said, yeah, I was about this.
I gotcha.
It was a cool job because they didn't discourage us from watching the shows. Like they actually, there was a row in the back of the balcony that we were allowed to use, which was kind of an obstructive view row, but nobody ever sat there. Once the show started, you were pretty free to move around. And the other great thing, from my point of view as a musician, that was so amazing was I got to see all the sound checks. Like only once, and I see I'm wearing my Dylan shirt, and you got your Dylan live book behind you. Dylan came to Massey Hall for, I think, 3 nights for the Slow Train Coming tour. And he hired his own security to keep Massey Hall staff out of the hall while he was sound checking. So we couldn't see Bob's sound check.
Come on. What a guy, eh? I guess that's just the show. Yeah, I guess that's just him, eh? And as well, I'm watching No Direction Home as well. That's a 3.5 hour documentary. So I'm taking it in phases, as I did the Tom Petty documentary.
Wonderful, yeah.
But yeah, just who he was, and I love that Royal Albert Hall show, because there's so many people walking away from that cursing the guy for changing his sound, and you're like, who are you? Like, it just kind of brings that into that question of like, everybody's going to have opinion. It doesn't matter who you are, what you do. You're going to have critics, and you really have to, as a musician especially, fight through that noise. So
yep. I watched the beginning of No Direction Home again not last night, the night before, and knowing the story is one thing. Hearing the story and hearing about the guy who yells at Judas and all the parts that go along with it, but when you see those shots from the stage looking out at the crowd while Dylan's playing, and you can tell he's kind of like got this fuck you attitude, and it's just so and then you see the crowd and they're just like, this is horrible. Like, there's one guy down to the right who's kind of just nodding his head a little bit along music, and I think he must feel like, boy, I'm like an outsider here.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, because that's sort of the one shot that really stands out to me from the beginning of that, is like, how is the audience reacting to this? And and then you think, now you think back and you're like, that was Robbie Robertson ripping the guitar with them. I mean, it's the band playing with them, but I mean, the fact that you're seeing Bob Dylan and Robbie Robertson jamming together on stage, I mean, you got to be kicking yourself back in the day for not enjoying that.
And you were there at the foot of history, like, just, and not understanding it at all, which, fair enough. I mean, that happens all the time. But you were so right about Robbie Robertson. I seen that, listening to that album, which I have about 1 million times in my life. I'm always amazed at how just outside of the box he is as a lead guitar player. Yeah. Like, even watching that again the other night, I was like, what is he doing? Like, it's just not. It's nowhere my mind goes. And that's such a beautiful thing about the way he plays. I don't think Levon's is on that band, though. I think Levon's out at that point.
By that point, right?
I think he comes back later, but I don't think he's the drummer on that show. I could be wrong, but I don't think so. But yeah, it's astounding. And then you get the interview of that guy right afterwards saying, well, even the acoustic stuff wasn't very good because he just kept playing his harmonica.
It was sloppy and off time, and like,
yeah. I really think that even that record, the acoustic stuff, is one of the best live records ever made. Like, just the version of Desolation Row on that, I think, as you know, I talked about it on Brent's podcast, but the version of Desolation Row is like, I don't think there's a song I've ever listened to as much as that particular version of that song. It's just incredible.
Okay, well, we can get into it. I appreciate you humoring me with the little bit of talk on that.
Oh, of course.
Joining me today on release day, we've Steven Stanley, and I want to say you are now a Steven Stanley of the Steven Stanley Band. We know you're from the Lowest of the Low, founding member of that band, and you've been in this a long time, and I think we need to start recognizing you for the Steven Stanley Band, in my opinion. Not that there's anything wrong with the Lowest of the Low, but you've really come a long way on your own. Since leaving the band there. So with that in mind, and obviously having the success that you guys had as a band with the gold record for Shakespeare, My Butt, great name, by the way. How did the success of that band and having a gold record really influence your career moving forward?
Well, I mean, it certainly didn't hurt. I think it really helped. Just it's a hard world to get recognized in at all. So I think it gave me the basis of at least a small group of fans that carried on and continued to be interested in what I was doing. So that's a big deal for sure in this day and age. I mean, I talk about this a lot with other musicians, that I wouldn't want to be a really young band starting off today. I mean, especially right now with COVID-19 in full play, it would be almost impossible. But it's tough because there's so much music. It's very fragmented. It's harder. There are obviously a lot more places you can hear music, but that doesn't make it necessarily easier. Still, it's a hard world to. We had a nice path with Lowest to Low, like through playing live. We were doing about 250 shows a year, and then getting really good radio support. And those two things combined together to take us from like being complete unknowns. 9 months later, we were kind of like the toast of Toronto, and then that led to a tour across Canada, opening for a British band called the Jazz Butcher. And from that point on, we could do no wrong across Canada. So it's there was a path, and I talk about touring across Canada. We could head out for 9 weeks and play pretty much every night. I think one tour that I found a poster for recently, we had done 44 shows in 46 days, and that's that's between here and Victoria, and then crossing into the States as well. So those were crazy. It was great. I keep using the word crazy, which I shouldn't, but those were interesting times. You know, you would pull up for 3 days in Calgary and do 3 nights in a row, and then move to Jasper and do 2 nights, and then go to Vancouver and do 3 nights, and Victoria will be 2 nights. So there's still really good touring for a band that reaches a certain level. I'm just not sure if, you know, like when we headed out the first time and even the second time across Canada, we were virtually unknown. So, but we still got to play for crowds. We still got to play for audiences. And I'm not sure, I mean, it may still be happening. But that was sort of, you know, pre having an agent. We were just kind of throwing this all together ourselves and going across the country. Interestingly enough, I did a similar thing, and I think we're going to talk about that, but in Europe 2 years ago, which was a tour that happened without agents, but put together by Chris Brown, my producer, and me. And we're going to talk about that because that's where we ended up at the Static Roots Festival. So.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, hey, man, feel free to sort of jump into that, because I mean, I'm definitely intrigued as to how, you know, you got out there and what brought you guys to that festival, and you know, deciding to record that, which
right,
you know, is I mean, pressure on its own.
I wish there was actually some I could tell you about a overriding master plan to record the show, but there really wasn't. We really lucked out because the festival is incredible. It's got this sort of built-in audience that travels from all over Europe to come to it. It's a real sort of, the Americana music scene in Europe is as powerful as it is in the States, and people move like, you know, nomads across the country to go to the various spots where the festivals are happening. So with that comes this dedication to try to capture the show a million different ways. So there was some stellar photographers in the audience, people shooting video. The festival itself shot every band as well, and then sort of time released some videos over the course of the next year after the festival ended. And there was a man there named Rene who had a really, really decent live recording setup, and he recorded the audio in the room and then mixed it with the sound man who also was recording the audio, and put together the tape that ended up being the live record. I didn't know any of that was happening till I got home to Canada. I didn't know any of that had happened. So to say that I had some big plan to put, so, you know, and then I heard the recording and thought, well, this is really cool, because one of the things that always sort of struck me about Lowest to Low is we had some amazing shows back in the day. Like some things that were where, you know, if you want to use a term, sort of broke through the wall, and you just have a night where you're almost unconscious. It's so good. Those were never recorded. Like we recorded some shows, and there were some good recordings, but I don't think we ever captured something really special. So in this case, you know, I think it's a show that has some faults and blemishes for sure. It's a group of musicians. Literally, 2 of the people there that are on stage with me are playing those songs for the first time. So that's pretty incredible in and of itself. But the vibe there was so amazing, and the festival was so amazing. And that night after we finished playing, we played, and then a band from Ireland played, and then Tara Lightfoot played, and she put on a blistering set. And then everybody went outside. There was this kind of courtyard outside this it was like kind of like a warehouse venue. And the accordion player, Gerard, that played with me, sat down, started playing songs, and we had this like night-long sing-song of like songs by the band and Neil Young and all these sort of Irish and German people singing Helpless with me and stuff like that. It was just the whole vibe of the festival was so amazing that I knew I was going to put it out some way. I thought I'd just put it on my website. But then when this came along and I had a little more time to sort of listen to it and think, I sort of thought, well, why don't I get it mastered and put it out? I mean, I like the idea that it'll be something people find if they go to Spotify or Apple Music and look through our catalog. It's not getting a sort of a first run promotion like an album normally would, but it's something that'll be there. And I'm sure you've had that experience. Like you go check out a band, it's like, oh, they did 3 live albums too that I'd never heard of, and now you've got something else you can sort of dig into and hear different versions of the song. So I like it for that reason.
And the beauty thing about hearing the band live and then finding live versions is that you really, if you're going to find them afterwards, it's because the live show resonated with you. And now you actually have recordings you can go listen to. You don't have to worry about listening to clips you took on your phone or videos or anything of that nature, or hoping that maybe it was recorded and hearing it later. You can come right back to finding it online. So I think that's a great way of approaching releasing a live record.
Yeah. And we sped up the release because the festival this year would have happened on July 10th. And of course it didn't happen this year. So right. The guy that runs the festival is a man named Dietmar, who is like one of the most lovely and biggest music fans I've ever met in my life. He said, well, is there any chance we could put it out that day? And it's kind of worked out perfectly because people that were at the show have been really responsive with the record. And that's kind of what I figured would happen. So yeah, I have no complaints. And I think, everything you said is right. It's just having something else there to find that will give you a different look at the band, which is good. And the other thing that's cool about this for me is that band that's on stage in Germany is very different from the band that's on stage when we play in Canada. Like here, we're a little more of a 2-guitar, bass and drums thing, and that's partially a financial decision. That was kind of a dream gig. The accordion player, who is an acclaimed player in Ireland, about 2 months before the festival, Dietmar sent me an email saying, how would you feel if I flew Gerard over to the festival and then he played with you? And I was like, are you kidding me? That's amazing. Jer played accordion on Jimmy and the Moon on one song on the Troubadour song. And it was the Troubadour song that started this whole getting to Europe thing, because we were toying with the idea of going to Europe, doing Ireland, doing England, but didn't have that sort of, anchor date. And then I got an email from Dietmar, and unfortunately he'd lost a really good friend of his, and he'd said he'd come across the song, the Troubadour song, and the lyrics just completely resonated with him. So this started this whole conversation back and forth. Then he offered us a slot on the festival, and I was like, okay, we're going to Europe. This is great. It's not the greatest financial decision ever made in the history of music. It's an expensive venture to take that many people over there, but it was, boy, never forget it. And now I've got a nice little document to remember it by. So,
can you describe what release day feels like? Does it change? Has it changed over the years that you've been releasing music? Do you still get the same feelings? What does release day feel like for you?
Well, it's certainly changed now, because release day would have always been synonymous with a show, and those club shows when you put out a record are spectacular. Like that, just for whatever reason, all the energy comes together on those nights where you're in a place where even though chances are you've been playing those songs for a while, you've been playing with that band for a while, maybe even been playing that for that crowd for a while, but there's just something different of marking the official launch of a new album. And now it's different. Now it was, especially this time around, it was more just sort of like, hoping some people notice it on the platform. And it was quite exciting. That day was quite exciting because like the European crowd is big on physical products. So they bought it up on Bandcamp that day. It was pretty cool. That's pretty exciting. But, it was a pretty singular experience. I was mostly just home that day, and, I talked to a few people, and it would be different if it was, we're ready to make our next record and are just kind of waiting for the right moment when it feels like it'll be safe to go back into a studio and do so. Mm-hmm. I think it's a really good time to put music out right now. I don't know. I'm happy to wait and see if there's a chance that things improve enough that we can be playing live again when that record comes out. So, but yeah, like I remember a quick story about years ago, Lois of the Low put out our second record, Hallucigenia, and about a week later, I was in the Rivoli and ran into Dave Porter, who was our A&R man at Universal, who was an incredibly gregarious and generous person. And if you were in the room with him, you didn't ever pay for a drink. So we were having some drinks, and we were talking about the release that had happened. I think it was maybe the Horseshoe. Maybe we did a club crawl. So there was a Horseshoe show, and I said, I don't take those for granted, because I never sort of know if I'm ever going to have a chance to do another record release. And he said to me, He said, what do you mean? You're going to be releasing records for your whole life. And I was like, I went home that night and I was kind of like, that's the first time I've ever thought about that even that. And here I am all these years later. And it's true. I've been putting stuff out in various different ways since that conversation. So I blame him.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It's a good question because it's really exciting. It is an exciting moment when you finally, to me, the best part of the whole process is the recording part. Making a record, you just feel that sort of happy tension build up in your gut that soon people are going to get to hear this. And it's usually just your friends and people that are close to you that's the emotion you can control, like how they're going to perceive it, how they're going to react to it. So when we put out Jimmy and the Moon, I actually had a party here for like probably 45 people I invited over to hear it in my house for the first time. And that was so cool. Like, so you're kind of like, you're pretty laid bare. People that have made the record have heard it and that's it. So now 45 of your friends are hearing it at the same time, and that could bomb terribly, but it didn't.
Yeah. Well, that's why you invite the friends. That way, hopefully it'll, doesn't have that opportunity.
Hopefully they're honest too.
Yeah. That's great. No, listening parties, like that's kind of been a little bit, and I know that people are doing some online listening parties as well for new releases, which is a really cool way of, just engaging fans and especially those that have been following you or at least closest to you for, your career.
It's pretty cool. And I think the view of music right now is it's just been put on a pedestal. People are just so appreciative. Like, as I said, I'm doing those live streams and the notes and messages I get afterwards, it's heartbreaking. It's beautiful how people are reacting to it. And I think, and I'm the same, like just looking, as you said, checking every possible avenue. I don't know if you get the Paste newsletter, but they put out a really good newsletter twice a week that gives you, here's the 10 albums you should listen to this week. Here's 10 songs that you should listen to this week. And that's been a real amazing source of new music for me as well. It's just stuff that, you just can't keep your eye on everything. Some stuff falls through the cracks. So, but there's so much coming through right now. And it's so great just as a fan to be able to listen and consume so much right now. That's really a good pastime.
For sure. Yeah. And I think the one big thing that I've been really happy about is the quality of the kind of music as well. It's obviously home studios has never been easier, and it's been like that way for years now that, you can record at home, but artists are really putting out good work, and really well recorded music. So that's also nice to see and hear as well, is that it's not like they're just doing it to release music. They're actually putting in the effort to make it sound high quality, so
lots of time to do it. So it's good. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. Lots of time to do that for sure.
A lot of those bands would be on the road right now and they're not. So
yeah. And that's the feedback I keep getting. I always ask, how has COVID-19 affected your, current, business from a business standpoint? And so I was like, well, I'd be in Virginia or I'd be in Chicago, they'd be somewhere making money off of this. So
yeah, for sure. Tough. But I think it's invented for people that are comfortable doing the online stuff, which a lot of people have really adapted to nicely. I think it's probably introduced a whole new aspect that'll carry on after whatever normal becomes again. But I've been talking to my ex bandmate from Lowest to Low, and he and I both agree that chances are live streaming is going to be a part of what we do for the rest of our lives. Like I think it can be such a nice companion to playing live as well, and you can do both, I think.
Yeah. And you know what else? On top of that, I think it's giving artists a sense of courage in general just to ask people to help support them. Because I know that musicians, and especially independent ones, new ones, seem to be afraid to ask. Like the real kind of musicians that are, I just want to play. I just, hope people hear me, and but I think that's really opening them up to be like, look, I'm struggling here. Do you think you could help me? And I think that could go a long way, whether you're struggling or not, just to say, hey, here's the new album, please support me. It'd be great if you could pick it up for $15, $10, whichever, price there is.
it is heartwarming, just the amount of messages you get saying, I'm all in helping you out making the next record when the time comes and stuff like that. It really, but you're absolutely right. And you're also incredibly correct about the idea of, I think a lot of musicians have trouble asking. And we now live in a world where there just isn't a great revenue stream. We did quite well in the early 90s, putting out records and touring like that. We all did okay. And it was completely the only thing we were all doing. And it was always, there was no reason to doubt that at all. There's lots of reasons to doubt it now because, as I said, I'm joking, but I hit like 1,000 streams on the album after about 4 days. And I think I posted on Twitter that I've now made 4 cents.
Yeah,
that's mind boggling to me.
I know.
And believe me, I'm not somebody who sits around thinking, oh boy, musicians just need to be, lying in a bed of money, but that is mind boggling.
Absolutely. No, it is. It's, it's tough though, right? I mean, like you think about it, what other way is there to kind of do it? I mean, Bandcamp is fantastic for that, but at the same time, right? I mean, you just think like, I don't know. And I'm speaking from a musician or a standpoint that doesn't rely on these platforms for my income, but what if we didn't have them, or if you guys didn't have them, what else would you do? I don't know.
I think it's my take on Bandcamp though is it's more niche than it would have been 15 years ago, because I think a lot of people have just made the leap to not buying digital, well, not even physical, but digital product. As I said, the Europeans seem to want to have the actual files, which is so cool. There's lots of avenues where I'm selling physical product like that vinyl on Jimmy and the Moon and CDs of all my records, except for this new one so far. I'm trying to figure that one out. It just didn't seem like the right time to spend a lot of money on it. But it's all more niche now. It's like there's not people, it's not because it's not the only way to consume music. It's not the first go-to. And I think that goes back to your question about artists being afraid to ask for help, because the world has sort of become attuned to getting most of this for free, and it's very, I mean, the accessibility is wonderful. As a fan, I love it. But I do try to buy the records that really resonate with me to sort of keep be a part of that economy anyways.
Yeah, so I know that there was this album, you kind of just, I feel like because of the pandemic, you were sort of like, hey, let's kick it into gear and start releasing this one. But was there anything different, or did you have to think about this one differently than with Jimmy and the Moon when it came to preparing marketing materials or materials for promotion before and after?
This one is completely homegrown. Basically, I'm lucky because I'm also a graphic designer. So everything that's happened on this record was either me, or I have 2 daughters that are quite skilled artists as well. So one of my daughters did the single art for Under the Minor Bird. So it was a completely homegrown, like almost a family project. And Jimmy, we certainly spent some money and effort on promotion in Canada and Europe, and in the States too. But we didn't have big plans to tour in the States, so our focus was on Europe and Canada. I did a lot of interviews, and we tried to get the record. We pushed the record to get reviewed, and it actually did get reviewed really nicely. So this one's been more of just like, I see it as something, and we talked about this before, but I really do see it as something that when people are digging into the catalog, and they'll discover that there's a live record too, and hopefully they hear the charm of the way the songs are different, and the way that band that was a real sort of flash in the pan experience played the songs and added something which to me is a very sort of different element, which I love. So, and I have a lot of musician friends who are very precious about arrangements. I'm kind of the opposite. When I'm playing with people, I want them to do whatever they want to do on the songs, and that happened in this, and it happened in a beautiful way. And I can't say enough about Jer, the accordion player, because he didn't know those songs all that well before. We had one sort of hour and a half rehearsal the day of that show, And there's some stuff on this record that he's added in on the accordion, especially on like Under the Minor Bird and By Her Side, that I just listen to and go, holy cow, like what a musical mind. It just, and I've always been a fan of people that play for the song and play from a melodic point of view. And he just adds this amazingly rich undertone melodies throughout the whole performance. And it just blows my mind. And then on top of that, and then I have the two Chris's, Chris Bennett, who plays guitar with me, who's one of my best friends and an astounding player, and then getting to play with Chris Brown, and he does the same thing on the keyboard. So yeah, that's why it came out, and I don't see it as a I need to have every last critic in the world have this record in their hands. That it doesn't really feel like that kind of record. The next one, which I'm really excited about, I think we've got a whole set of songs that are ready to go. Although I'm in the middle of the last couple of days writing this thing that I think is going to be like a stairway to heaven, like
amazing.
Yeah. Which I'm really happy about. So I mean, and like, so there you go. Like that, if we would have been recording and probably finished the record by now, if the pandemic hadn't hit, so that song wouldn't have had a chance to be on the record. Now it'll be probably the centerpiece of the record. So I'm excited about the future when that finally arrives, and that album will get the full treatment, hopefully.
Well, I think it's a great way to approach a live album, just even in general. I mean, just to be like, look, this is what it is. This is an accompaniment to what we've got, and because those albums, they're really right. I mean, sure, you could play some newer songs at live, but you're sort of playing at a live show what everybody can hear or has heard before. So these are really just that alternate version, just like Tom Petty's got 10,000 alternate versions of his songs that they can release. Well,
that's such a good point, because we live in a world where we listen to music a lot more randomly. And I do love that. And Tom Petty's a great example of it, where you'll hear a song and you're like, well, wait a second, that's not the way I remember it. And then you realize that's a whole other version. And it's probably from that album that they put out right after he passed, where it's like a collection of different versions of everything he's ever recorded. And that's, I mean, when you're a fan of that music, like, yeah, it's just wonderful to find stuff that way.
Yeah, you can listen to 10 different versions of Refugee. Absolutely.
100%. Well, I mean, especially like, to me, the deeper you dig into his work, there is a mind that is a studio arranger beyond anything. Like, just the way he builds a song in the studio, and I'm sure it's not just him. I'm sure it's like Mike Campbell and Ben Montench and the whole band working together. But boy, there is some just brilliance where something will just appear for a couple seconds and then never appear again. Some little sound, a little guitar strum or something.
I've got to maybe do more research, but I mean, I don't think you could ever find like a ragtag bunch of guys that could put together a band like Tom Petty. And here we go off topic again, but I just thinking about like those guys that make up that band is just like, man, out of this world. I guess the Grateful Dead, you just go back to those kinds of bands. But
and I think you also have to realize that because of the length of the career that we can now look at, they had a chance to become that too. They were obviously good players, but there really is something about chemistry amongst players. When it works so well. And that's a great example of it. And, there's a lot of interchangeable parts. I mean, Mike Campbell and Ben Montench seem to be involved in most of it, but there's a lot of other people that come in and out, especially drummers and bass players over the course of that band's longevity. But it all works. And mostly because you have a guy who can write songs like There's No Tomorrow.
And now, how are you releasing these? Like with the live album, are these independent releases? Do you distribute these yourselves, or is this still under Wolf Island Records?
So the live album is Wolf Island Records, and I was surprised, but our European label, which is called Continental Record Services, also wanted to put it out, so they put it out in Europe. And that's where I'm talking, where there may be some physical product at some point down the line. With the two back catalog albums, I'm just putting them out myself because I own all the rights, and it just didn't seem to. I mean, we can't split the 7 cents up. It haven't make any sense to anybody. So,
between you, the label, the PR, and totally, yeah.
Everyone gets a penny.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, so we've kind of touched a little bit on the COVID thing, so I don't want to really end with that question. I'd love to know sort of what your advice is and recommendations for indie artists today releasing music is, best practices, things to consider.
Sure.
If you have any of that, yeah.
I think to me, it's still play a lot. I think you get so much out of playing live, whether it's actually, when we're back in the clubs or whether it's doing it online. You find out so much about songs by playing them. Like it really, it sounds so cliche, but it's so true. You find out so much about a song when you play it for people. Because you can sit in your basement, as I do, writing and playing songs to yourself till you're blue in the face. It really doesn't become real until you played it for somebody. For me, anyways. So that's an important thing. And then I think just, like I said before, we're in a time of history where content is craved. So create and try. I mean, I'm not a great example. I am a really sporadic writer. I love writing, but I don't try to force it. And, I look up to guys like Jeff Tweedy, who have the adage of I write something every day. I'm not that way, but I certainly, when like in the last 2 days, every plan I had has gone out the window for the most part, because I've just been sort of so, micro focused on this song that I'm working on. So I'll just, yesterday I had a bunch of things I was going to do, and then I realized, oh my God, it's 7:00 now and I haven't done any of them. So, but that's great. That's, and sometimes that's just to get 2 lines. This particular piece is like a real sort of lyrical puzzle, and I'm really sort of fretting over every line. So sometimes just you spend 5 hours just to get 2 lines that you go, okay, that's good.
Yeah. Yeah. It's good. It's nice to hear you say that too, because I know a lot of when I used to write was write it there, because that's when you're in the moment. This is where this should be written. You can't let this last 2 or 3 weeks to write this thing, which I think a lot of people fall under that, and not that it's wrong, but it really does pigeonhole you to feel like, oh, I have to write this while I'm in the moment. You let it be and come back to it. So I think that's
back to it for sure, 100%. And that's another huge lesson. But I think something you just said is also really important to me, and a lesson that I've learned probably in the last 10 years is when the energy and everything sort of lines up and it's the moment's right, to not ignore that. I think I did that a lot in the old days, which kind of like, I'd rather just watch TV or whatever. I think now when that moment strikes, I don't let it pass. And then you get great results out of it. And some songs happen in a half hour. Some of them take 7 years. So there's no secret or formula from that point of view. I think just like ride the horse until the ride's over.
Man, thank you so much to Stephen Stanley for his time and his candor. It was such a pleasure to have that conversation with him, and I hope that you guys felt like you were sort of a fly on the wall in that conversation. Joining me now is Graham, associate producer and editor of the Release Day series. Graham, big fan of that episode or what?
Yeah, I think that it is probably one of the best interviews getting to hear the whole thing is incredible. And just to hear all the stories that he has, right from working in Massey Hall and like being able to see all those bands and all that kind of stuff up to, then touring in Germany and him not even knowing that it was being recorded, that performance there, and still putting it out.
A big thanks to Brent Jensen, who we mentioned on the first episode, for helping set that one up. He works with Stephen and has known him for a long time. And you can go check out a few Stephen Stanley episodes of Brent's podcast, No Sleep Till Sudbury, on Brent's podcast, No Sleep Till Sudbury.
And now you did tee up this episode with bringing up Stephen Stanley's first band, Lowest of the Low, and like their album, Shakespeare My Butt. I remember being a kid, my dad had the CD.
What's that?
Yeah.
What's that, Grandpa Graham?
The compact disc. So he had the CD, and like it was just funny for like me and my brother to be like, look, you can put this on a CD, like Shakespeare My Butt. But then it's like the music of it was really solid. And that was just incredible to have like that connection where it's like, now however many years on, I'm, sort of like adjacent to this interview with someone that I had a connection with when I was, young. So it was really cool.
And that album they really did independently. I know that Ron Hawkins was a big fan of independence and not a fan of the corporate world. And, they really took this album just like to distribute it themselves. They made sure that they were the creative force behind the album, and they took care of all the creative, and then they went to a label to help distribute it. Whether they said, yeah, we're going to distribute it, or no, we're not going to distribute it, didn't matter. It was going to get distributed, but they really, all that creative side, the writing, the artwork, that was all them. And then the distribution, they really took advantage of the label. So in the 90s, this band is, really has set those roots and the foundation for the Canadian music industry going forward. So yeah, and as you mentioned, we do have an episode of this. You can go and check out the visuals of the episode on releasedayseries.com. We've got some great photos and video from Steven's show in Germany. Not that we took, but that were provided to us to lay over the interview. So it's cool. It's got some great visuals, so you can go check that out on our website.
You have some press releases that you are going to get through. Right. So let's listen to those, and then you and I can have a little discussion about what we've been listening to over the past week here.
Yeah, totally. I received some press releases last week with some new music coming out later this month and early next. First one was from Reed Zoe. Her song Antidote is coming out January 15th. After that, Julie Neff has an EP entitled Over It. That's coming out January 27th. And lastly, Small Sins, the pet project of Canadian writer, performer, producer Thomas Darcy. He'll be releasing Volume 2 on February 12th. So some really cool music coming out. I've got the links to their music. It's all like hidden, Graham. I've got like the exclusive sneak peek at all this music.
And now let's talk about some music that people listening to this podcast can go listen to right away for things that we've been listening to this past week, and I'll start it up.
Absolutely, Graham. Why don't you take this section? Why don't you start things off?
Two bands that I really like have released albums recently. The first one being the Dirty Nil. They released an album January 1st, 2021. That album is killer. My favorite song off that is Blunt Force.
Fun album.
Concussion.
Fun album.
We can't say the name on this podcast. I think
we can.
Well, I mean, it's our podcast. We can. Do you want me to say
whatever we want? Go for it.
The album name is Fuck Art. It's a great album. It's all bangers. And then another band that I've been listening to forever, USS. They released what is their final album, and it is called Einsteins of Consciousness. And another little sneaky one, there's a song by Post Data, and the song is called Nobody Knows. Those have been the things that are just nonstop for me over here, just always playing them, just really digging them all. What have you been listening to, Alex?
Nice. Yeah. No, I know I kind of said it, but that Dirty Nil album, it is like, 30 minutes of just heart pounding, fast paced, great Canadian music, man.
Just rage.
Just rage. It was great. Yeah, so I've been listening to The Weather Station. That is the musical project of Canadian singer-songwriter and actress Tamara Lindemann, and her song Atlantic just came out, and it's man, just good music, just something to put on and chill with, and I really just am digging that tune. Previous release day guest Loviet released a song December 11th called Dull Shine that is just, I don't think she knows how to write anything other than like smash hits. And lastly, went back a little bit into 2020, June 29th, Indigenous artist, producer, hip hop producer Dave Strickland released his album Spirit of Hip Hop, and then subsequently released Spirit of Hip Hop remixes on November 20th. But man, he's just got like such a storied history within the hip hop community. It is insane. Like, he goes as far back as working with, you know, Choclair and Jellystone and Cardinal Chaos. Like, and now he's done work with Drake, and he's also worked with Method Man and Redman. Like, the guy is just like a great producer and has put some wicked hip hop together. So, yeah, that's what I've been putting on a lot during this insanely crazy work time in my life. So thanks to Dave Strickland, the weather station, and Loviet for getting me through the 9 to 5.
And now our work is done here. Now it's time for you guys to go follow us on Instagram at releaseday_series and over on Twitter at releasedaysrs. And we're just posting a lot. We're talking about music. If you're a musician and you have some cool music coming out, you're from the GTA, you're just all over Canada, send it to us. We love it. We always love to hear about your stories and the things that, you know, the art that you're putting out into this world.
Absolutely. And if you've enjoyed what you've heard today and you're enjoying the podcast, it'd be great if you could share it, leave us a lovely 5-star rating and a positive comment to help spread the word about these fantastic musicians. It's a lot to ask, I know, but it would be a huge help in getting the word out. So that's it. Next episode will be with Newfoundlander country musician Justin Fancy. I'm Alex Heward.
And I'm Grant Beery. We'll catch you next week.
Thanks for listening.